What really happens inside the world's biggest cruise ships. 2025. Imagine a building, 20 floors high. Now put it in the ocean, add 10,000 people, and make it move. Sounds impossible, right? Well, buckle up, because that's Icon of the Seas, the biggest cruise ship on Earth right now. And what happens inside is absolutely insane. I'm talking about a floating city that defies everything you think you know about ships. Today, I'm going to blow your mind showing you how this beast actually works. Where does all the water come from when you're surrounded by undrinkable ocean? Where does the poop go when 10,000 people are using bathrooms? How does it even stay afloat with that many people partying on the top deck? Trust me, by the end of this, you'll never look at cruise ships the same way again. Some of this stuff kept me up at night. Let's talk about size first, because honestly, your brain can't even process how massive this thing is. Picture this. Icon of the Seas is 1,200 feet long. That's 4 football fields laid end to end. 4 entire football fields. It stands 20 stories tall, literally scraping the sky, and is as wide as a 16-lane highway. The weight? Brace yourself. 250,000 tons. That's the same as 50,000 elephants all standing on a platform in the middle of the ocean. But here's the part that makes my head explode. This isn't even unusual anymore. Caribbean just casually has 2 of these absolute units now. Icon of the Seas started sailing in 2024, and Star of the Seas, its identical twin, just joined the party in 2025. And get this mind-bending fact, cruise ships today are 8 times bigger than cruise ships from 40 years ago. 8 times. They just keep getting bigger and bigger, like some kind of maritime arms race. Want to know who's winning? The top 5 biggest ships in 2025 are Icon of the Seas, Star of the Seas at the same insane size, followed by Utopia of the Seas, Wonder of the Seas, and Symphony of the Seas. Notice something? They're all Royal Caribbean ships. Every single one. They literally own the biggest ship game, and they're not even trying to hide it. Now, ready for the passenger numbers? Because this is where it gets crazy. This ship holds 7,600 passengers when it's totally packed to the gills, plus 2,350 crew members working around the clock like ants in a colony. That's almost 10,000 people total. Let that sink in. That's more than the entire population of many small towns, all crammed onto one ship floating in the middle of the freaking ocean. It's basically a mobile city with a zip code. Why are they building them so big? The answer is brilliantly simple and kind of evil. Money. Pure, beautiful profit. Here's the genius part that cruise companies figured out. Whether you have 3,000 passengers or 7,000 passengers, certain costs stay exactly the same. The engines cost the same to build. The theater costs the same. The pool costs the same. But here's the kicker. More passengers equals more ticket sales equals exponentially more profit. It's like running a bus. Running a bus with 10 people costs almost the same as running it with 50 people. But those 50 people pay 5 times as much total. Cruise companies figured this out and went absolutely crazy with it. They're basically printing money. So how do you move something this ridiculously huge? Great question. Icon of the Seas has 6 massive engines, and when I say massive, I mean each one is the size of a school bus and weighs 196 tons. That's heavier than 30 full-size pickup trucks. Together, these beasts create the same power as 600 cars running at full throttle at the same time. Can you even imagine that? 600 cars worth of power just to move one ship. But here's what makes it really special and kind of revolutionary. These engines don't run on regular diesel fuel like old ships. They run on something called LNG, liquefied natural gas. It's basically natural gas that's been supercooled to minus 162 degrees Celsius until it turns into a liquid. Why does this matter? Because it's way cleaner than regular ship fuel. No thick black smoke billowing into the sky. No nasty sulfur smell that makes you gag. Way less pollution choking the atmosphere. Now hold on to your seat for this next part. The ship burns over 200 tons of fuel every single day. Every single day. That's like filling up 200 cars completely full, draining them empty, and doing it again the next day, and the next day, and the next day forever. At current prices, we're talking about $120,000 in fuel costs per day. Just for fuel. That's $3.6 million per month. Let me put that in perspective that'll make your jaw drop. The average person spends maybe $2,000 a year on gas for their car. This ship spends that amount in about 20 minutes of cruising. 20 minutes. The ship has 4 gigantic fuel tanks, and each one is 90 feet long and holds 307 tons of fuel. The fuel is kept at minus 162 degrees Celsius. That's so cold, it would freeze your hand solid instantly if you touched it. Instant frostbite. When you see the ship refueling at port, it's absolutely wild. They pump in all this super cold liquid gas using special barges with crews in protective gear like they're handling radioactive material. The technology on these ships is straight out of science fiction. When the ship docks, it can plug into the city's electricity like you'd plug in your phone, except this charger is the size of a fire hose. Engines turn off completely. This means zero emissions while sitting in port, which is huge for coastal cities that were getting choked by ship exhaust. But wait, it gets cooler. The ship shoots millions, and I mean millions, of tiny air bubbles under the hull while it's moving. This creates an air cushion that makes the ship literally slide through water easier, like it's hovering on a cloud. This saves 7% on fuel. 7% might not sound like much until you remember they're burning 200 tons a day. That's 14 tons saved daily just from bubbles. Think of it like an air hockey table, except the ship is the puck floating on a layer of bubbles. Insane, right? Here's another mind-blower. The engines get super hot when they're running, obviously. Instead of just wasting all that heat, they capture it and use it to make extra electricity, up to 3 megawatts. That's enough to power 2,500 homes. Nothing goes to waste on this ship. It's like they looked at every possible source of energy and said, yeah, we're using that too. Parts of the ship even run on hydrogen fuel cells. These create electricity using hydrogen, and the only waste product is pure water. Zero pollution. This is literally the same technology NASA uses for space shuttles, and now it's powering the karaoke bar on a cruise ship. What a time to be alive. The top speed is about 22 knots, which translates to roughly 25 miles per hour on water. Now you might be thinking, that's not that fast, and you're technically right. But remember, this thing weighs as much as 50,000 elephants. Moving that absurd amount of mass through water at 25 miles per hour is actually incredibly impressive. It's like making a mountain move at highway speeds. For comparison, a speedboat might hit 50 to 60 miles per hour, but it weighs maybe 2 tons. This weighs 250,000 tons. Totally different physics. The ship uses 3 huge propellers called azipods that can rotate 360 degrees. This means the ship can basically spin in place if needed, which is absolutely bonkers when you think about it. Each azipod weighs about 260 tons and packs 20 megawatts of power. Steering this monster is wild. If you turn the wheel right now, the ship won't start turning for several seconds because of the sheer inertia. And once it starts turning, it takes forever to stop. Ship captains need serious skills and nerves of steel. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly kind of magical. Remember, there are 10,000 people on this ship living their best vacation lives. Each person uses about 200 to 250 liters of water per day. That's for showers, toilets, drinking, cooking, washing dishes, filling pools, running water slides, everything. Do the math real quick. That's over 2 million liters of water needed every single day. 2 million liters. That's enough to fill an Olympic swimming pool almost daily. So where does it come from? Do they carry it all in giant tanks? Absolutely not. That would be way too heavy and take up way too much space. So what's the solution? Get ready for this. They make it from the ocean. Yeah, you read that right. They turn salt water into drinking water while sailing through the middle of the ocean. It's like having a magic wand that turns poison into drinking water. There are two main ways they pull off this miracle. First is reverse osmosis, and I promise this is cooler than it sounds. Think of it like a super powerful coffee filter on steroids. They pump ocean water through special filters at really high pressure. We're talking 800 to 1,000 psi. That's about 60 times the pressure in your car tires. Imagine that force. The filters have microscopic holes so tiny you can't see them even with a regular microscope. These holes are so small that only water molecules can squeeze through. Everything else, salt, bacteria, viruses, fish poop, whatever, gets blocked. What comes out the other side? Pure, clean water. Cleaner than most tap water you drink at home. It's honestly mind-blowing when you think about it. You go in with undrinkable ocean water, and seconds later you've got water clean enough for a baby to drink. The second method is even more clever because it uses free energy. They take the heat from those massive engines, which would otherwise just be wasted, and use it to boil seawater. The water turns into steam. Steam rises. Salt can't evaporate, so it stays behind in the bottom like a crusty residue. They collect the steam, cool it back down, and boom, fresh water. It's basically free water because they're using heat that would otherwise just radiate into the air and be wasted. It's like using the heat from your computer to warm your coffee, except on a massive industrial scale. But the process doesn't stop there. After making pure water, they still have to do some tweaking. First, they add minerals back because pure distilled water actually tastes flat and weird. Your tongue expects certain minerals in water, so they add back calcium and magnesium to make it taste normal and healthy. Then they absolutely nuke any remaining germs using chlorine, UV light, or ozone. This water gets tested more than tap water in most cities. After treatment, it goes into huge storage tanks in the bottom of the ship. These tanks hold thousands of tons of fresh water at any time. Then miles and miles of pipes, like a circulatory system, carry water all over the ship to every single sink, shower, toilet, fountain, pool, and kitchen. It's an engineering masterpiece hidden in the walls. The ship makes 90% of its own water. Think about that. 90%. That means they barely need to take water from ports, which is absolutely huge for small Caribbean islands where fresh water is already limited and precious. These islands often struggle with water supply, so when cruise ships stop needing their water, it actually helps the local communities. The ship can store about 3,000 tons of fresh water at any time. That's like having 3 million bottles of water on board. But they're constantly making more as people use it, like a never-ending fountain. Here's a bonus trick that's so clever it's almost sneaky. Air conditioners make condensation, those water droplets you see dripping from your AC unit, right? Well, the ship collects every single drop from thousands of AC units all over the ship and uses it for laundry. We're talking thousands of gallons per day of completely free water. They also collect rainwater when it storms and use it for washing the decks. It's like they saw water and said, "We're taking all of it, every drop, from every possible source." The water on cruise ships is tested constantly, way more often than tap water at home. They test for bacteria, minerals, chlorine levels, pH balance, temperature, everything you can imagine. There are strict international maritime laws about water quality, and ships take this super seriously. Nobody wants to talk about waste, but stick with me because this is actually fascinating and kind of gross and amazing all at once. Picture this: 10,000 people eating 3 meals a day, showering, using toilets, doing laundry. That creates an absolutely staggering amount of waste. We're talking 10 tons of garbage per day. 10 tons. That's the weight of about 6 cars in trash every single day. Plus 2 million liters of wastewater per day. That's 70 tons of trash per week. Over a year, that's more than 3,000 tons of garbage. That's heavier than the Eiffel Tower. So what happens to it all? Where does it go? Does it just pile up somewhere? Does it get dumped overboard? The answers might surprise you. Toilet waste, which the cruise industry politely calls black water because nobody wants to use the P word, goes through an absolutely incredible treatment process. First, they filter it. Big stuff gets filtered out first, and trust me, you don't want to know what the big stuff is. Then they add special bacteria that basically eat the organic waste. This is called biological treatment, and it's the same thing your body does with food, just external. These bacteria colonies are carefully maintained and monitored. Next comes chemical treatment, where chlorine or UV light absolutely murders any remaining germs. Before discharge, the water is tested in onboard labs to make sure it meets incredibly strict international standards. If it doesn't pass, it can't be discharged. Period. The testing is rigorous. Finally, the clean water goes back to the ocean, but only when the ship is at least 12 miles from shore and moving. The water that comes out is actually cleaner than what many cities put back into rivers. I'm not exaggerating. Cruise ship water treatment is often better than land-based municipal systems because they have to meet stricter standards and face massive fines if they screw up. Gray water from showers and sinks is easier to clean because it's not as contaminated. It still has soap, shampoo, food particles from dishwashing, and other stuff. It goes through similar treatment involving filters, UV light, testing, and then it's clean enough to discharge. For trash, things get really systematic. Glass, plastic, metal, paper, they all get separated into different categories. They have an entire crew team whose full-time job is just sorting recycling. It's like they run a recycling plant on the ship. They crush everything to save precious space. Aluminum cans get crushed into tiny dense cubes. Plastic bottles get compacted. Glass gets pulverized into sand. This reduces volume by up to 80%, which is crucial when you're producing tons of trash daily and have limited storage. Some stuff gets burned in super hot incinerators that run over 1,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt aluminum. The smoke gets filtered and scrubbed clean before release using advanced filtration systems. The ash gets stored and taken to proper disposal facilities on land. Everything that can't be recycled or burned gets compressed using industrial compactors and stored in huge bins below deck. When the ship reaches port, specialized garbage trucks come aboard and haul it all away to proper disposal sites. Here's the coolest part that sounds like actual science fiction. Icon of the Seas has this insane new technology called microwave-assisted pyrolysis. Let me break that down because it sounds complicated, but it's actually genius. They take food waste, and we're talking all the leftover food from 40 restaurants, plus whatever passengers don't finish on their plates, and they put it in a special sealed chamber. Then they blast it with intense microwave energy in an environment with zero oxygen. The microwave heat is so intense, it breaks down the food at a molecular level into two useful things. First, synthetic fuel oil, which they actually use to power other parts of the ship. Second, biochar, which is basically pure carbon pellets that make incredible fertilizer for farms. So leftover pizza and chicken bones literally become fuel that powers the ship, plus fertilizer that grows food on farms. It's the circle of life on steroids. Icon was the first ship in the entire world to have this technology. It processes about 1 to 2 tons of food waste per day, turning garbage into useful resources. That's some next-level recycling. Ships can't just dump stuff anywhere anymore. International maritime laws are incredibly strict now. Black water must be treated to specific standards before release. They can only discharge when at least 12 miles from shore. Some special areas like Alaska and the Baltic Sea have even stricter rules. Everything is monitored 24/7, logged in digital systems, and reported to authorities. Breaking these rules equals huge fines. We're talking millions of dollars, plus potential criminal charges, plus the PR nightmare. Modern cruise ships actually follow these rules carefully because the systems cost hundreds of millions of dollars to install and maintain, and the cruise lines know environmental groups and governments are watching closely.